Welcome to our literary and jury charge practice. Let's start out with this jury charge. Here we go. The third element of this type of crime requires that one or both men did perform an act to effect the object of the conspiracy. Such an act must be more than mere planning. If there was any action which was a step toward accomplishing the criminal goal, that is sufficient. If you are sure beyond a reasonable doubt that Bart Bell intended to kidnap the child, that he was part of a conspiracy to commit that crime, and that one or both men did do something to contribute to the commission of it, you should find the defendant guilty of being a partner to the crime. If you are not so satisfied, you must find him not guilty. As I said to you before, the offense of kidnapping, as that term applies to this case, is committed by one who uses deceit to induce a child to go from one location to another, and who does so with intent to cause her to be secretly confined. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this crime, you must be sure that the prosecution has proved the following three elements, and that it has done so by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that either Bart Bell or someone else induced the child to go from one place to another. Second, that either Bart Bell or the other person used deceit to induce the child to go from one place to another. Third, that either Bart Bell or the other person induced the child to go from one location to another with the intention that the child would be confined. Alrighty, now let's move on, do a little literary material from our Who Moved My Cheese book. The Adventures of Sniff and Scurry and Hem and Haw. Okay, here we go. As time went on, Sniff and Scurry continued their routine. They arrived early each morning and sniffed and scratched and scurried around Cheese Station C, inspecting the area to see if there had been any changes from the day before. Then they would sit down to nibble on the cheese. One morning, they arrived at Cheese Station C and discovered there was no cheese. They weren't surprised, since Sniff and Scurry had noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller every day. They were prepared for the inevitable and knew exactly what to do. They looked at each other, removed the running shoes they had tied together, and hung conveniently around their necks, put them on their feet, and laced them up. The mice did not overanalyze things, and they were not burdened with many hard beliefs. To the mice, the problem and the answer were both simple. The situation at Cheese Station C had changed. So Sniff and Scurry decided to change. They both looked out into the maze. Then Sniff lifted his nose, sniffed, and nodded to Scurry, who took off running through the maze, while Sniff followed as fast as he could. They were quickly off in search of new cheese. Later that same day, Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C. They had not been paying attention to the small changes that had been taking place each day, so they took it for granted their cheese would be there. They were unprepared for what they found. What? No cheese? Ham yelled. He continued yelling, "No cheese? No cheese?" As though if he shouted loud enough, someone would put it back. "Who moved my cheese?" he hollered. Finally, he put his hands on his hips. His face turned red, and he screamed at the top of his voice, "It's not fair." Okay, so that was him is very upset. And let me see, we had a couple of possibly challenging words. Let me just look back here. Inevitable. Inevitable. That's one to work on. I think that was the one I wanted to bring to your attention. All right, well, we'll leave hem and haw and sniff and scurry for now. And let's go back to, actually, let's try a new jury charge, okay? We'll do a part of this jury charge. Okay, here we go. The duty of the jury is to determine whether the plaintiff should be able to recover all or part of the damages resulting from the plaintiff's part. As indicated, the defendant has admitted liability for a portion of the injury. Whether the plaintiff suffered damages as a result of the liability of the defendant is not the only issue to be decided. What may be decided is whether these damages resulted from the defendant being the proximate cause of the accident. As a juror, you must decide the issue of proximate cause. The proximate cause is the immediate cause. While the defendant may be a part of the cause, the defendant may not be the proximate cause. There is a difference. when the defendant admitted liability for the accident, the defendant did not admit liability for being the proximate cause of the accident. A plaintiff who is injured as a proximate or legal result of some negligent conduct on the part of the defendant is entitled to recover for such injury from that defendant. The question for you is to determine whether this fits this case in question. You must examine whether the conduct of the defendant was negligent. You must also examine whether this negligent conduct was the only conduct that caused the accident. Okay, so we had proximate cause and liability. Okay, just negligent. Okay, just some words in there that you may want to practice. And I'm kind of trying to glance ahead here. If we go ahead and when we go ahead and finish this one up, looks like we're still talking about negligent, proximate cause, liability, talking about the verdict. Okay, let's try just a little bit more of this one. If it was the only negligent conduct, then you must consider this in your decision. With regard to liability, you must determine the proximate cause of the accident. You must know that negligence must also be considered on the part of the plaintiff. You must examine whether the conduct of this individual was in any way responsible for what happened. You must examine the conduct of the truck driver as well. A plaintiff who was injured as a proximate or legal result of such negligent conduct on the part of a defendant is entitled to recover from that injury from the defendant. The amount must be decided. The plaintiff is entitled to a verdict in this case. If you find that the defendant was negligent and that such negligence was a proximate or legal cause of injury to the plaintiff, you must determine whether the driver of the truck could have been the proximate cause. For this reason, you must know and understand the meaning of negligence. All right, that will conclude our literary jury charge practice. Thank you.